Hello, everyone. Welcome to the All Day Football Show. I'm your host, Jackson Kellogg. Today, we're getting into NFL Power Rankings Week 17. Final week of the regular season is coming up this weekend. Hope you all had a happy New Year's Eve and hope the new year treats you well. Getting right into this week's episode at the number 32 spot, winning the tank of the season, the Jacksonville Jaguars, as the Jaguars got absolutely decimated by the Bears last week. The Jaguars are starting Mike Glennon this week, officially putting an end to Gardner Minshew's career as a Jaguar, most likely. Jaguars will be drafting Trevor Lawrence at the number 1 spot, barring any weird trade scenarios, and they'll be rocking with him in the future. But congratulations, Jaguars, on completing your tank. At the 31 spot, the New York Jets. The Jets are on a 2-game win streak at a time where it doesn't really matter. A 2-game win streak would have meant more for them in week 3, but come week 16 where they were 0-13, winning 2 games doesn't really help you out too much. And there is a possibility that they might close out with a 3-game winning streak against my Patriots this week. So, for a team that looked to be in the right position to go get Trevor Lawrence, they are no longer in that position, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets stick with Sam Darnold and trade back from whatever draft pick they have. At the 30 spot, the Detroit Lions. The Lions are just a laughing stock of a team. They cannot do anything good in any aspect of their game. They got absolutely decimated in the first half against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers bench all their starters, and the Lions still can't do anything to come back and win. The Lions are most likely going to be doing a complete rebuild this offseason, which will include the likes of probably Matthew Stafford leaving, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Adrian Peterson, and then a whole lot of defensive talent, or lack thereof. So this Lions team is going to look very different next year, and we'll see how it affects the team. At the 29 spot, the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts has brought an infusion of talent to the quarterback position. We no longer hear whining about, Carson Wentz's weapons are awful, that's why he can't do anything. Yeah, well, Hurts is doing a pretty good job with what he had with the same group that Wentz had. Granted, it hasn't equated to wins as the Eagles were not able to beat the Cowboys last week, but that just shows that the Eagles aren't a good team, and it's not just the injuries that have plagued them. The Eagles' defense is atrocious, and they're going to have to work on that this offseason. I don't think the offense is going to need a ton of work, honestly. Their offensive line is going to need some reworking due to the cap. They're going to have to release a lot of their veterans to get under the cap. But the Eagles are in a very large predicament with their whole Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts situation, and it's just not a good spot to be in. At 28, the Denver Broncos. Broncos lost a close one to the Chargers this past weekend. It just continues the Broncos' inability to be able to win games this year. They've won games where they weren't expected to win, kept some games closer, but all in all, the Broncos just weren't a good team this year. They've been all over the place with injuries on the offensive side of the ball, and the defense has dealt with some big injuries, which forced younger players to have to step in who just weren't ready to do so. This Broncos team, I do think if they stick with Locke, can be a good team next year. Their receiving core will include Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and KJ Hamler. You'll get Noah Fant at the tight end spot, and then you'll have Melvin Gordon and possibly Phillip Lindsay still as your two-headed running back group. So it's a very good-looking offense, and the O-line isn't terrible. It's definitely one that needs work, but it can be worked on. It's not a complete rebuild on that O-line, but I do think the Broncos are going to be in a good position in the future, but they're going to have to make the right decisions as to how to get there. At 27, the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are doing well on the winning side of games this year. Granted, I don't think it bodes well for them for the fact that they are going to lose the chance to get Penei Sewell, um, who they desperately need on that offensive line. But it's good to see that the Bengals can still get wins even with their backup quarterbacks going for them. It just makes it more promising for what Joe Burrow is going to be able to do for this team. The fact that Ryan Finley's gone in, he's beat the Steelers, beat the Texans. That's a good showing for the Bengals team. So as long the Bengals do have the right building stones, it's just going to be a matter of, similar to the Broncos, are they going to be able to put those building stones together and build a good team, or are they just going to continue being the mediocre team they've been for the last few years? At 26, the Atlanta Falcons. They've done it again, folks. Down 17-14 against the Chiefs, a game they were expected to be blown out in because the Chiefs are just that good this year. They're down by 3. Matt Ryan pushes them down to get into field goal range. Younghoe Koo, who's been voted to the Pro Bowl this year, one of the better kickers in the league this year, 39-yard field goal. Thinking this is an insta-in, we're going to go to overtime. Nope, it shanks far right. Granted, it was tipped at the line. It wasn't talked about much, but it was tipped, and that might have had an effect on it. But in typical Falcon fashion, they kept the game close just to lose over something like that. Bravo, Falcons. At 25, the Falcons' division counterpart, the Carolina Panthers, get a good win over the Washington football team. I think the Panthers are one of the most promising teams going into the future. They have younger talent at all different points of the team. I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater is going to be the quarterback of the future for them. He's been okay. He hasn't been like an elite quarterback, but I mean, what can you expect coming off of damaged knees? He's not going to be the same that he was before those knee injuries, but he's still a good thrower, definitely a better thrower than Cam Newton, so I do think the Panthers made the right decision with their quarterback this offseason, and if they are going to stick with Bridgewater, not draft a quarterback this offseason, I do think they're going to have a little bit more to work on, a little bit on more talent on the defensive side of the ball, as it is a younger group, but they are talented. So as long as they can develop together, grow to be a good unit, I think the Panthers could be a wild card contender next year. At 24, the New York Giants. The Giants have just been inconsistent this year. They lose again this week. The Giants, it's hard to tell whether they're going to be a good team going forward or not. The Giants can still win the division, which is absolutely crazy. They play the Cowboys this weekend. If they beat the Cowboys and the Eagles beat Washington, then the Giants take the division. Crazy. But at 6-10, no less. So we'll see how that goes. I honestly think there is a chance. I don't know if Daniel Jones is the quarterback of the future of this team. They played better with Colt McCoy at quarterback than they did with Daniel Jones. I mean, Daniel Jones has been turnover prone. He hasn't looked like a fluent NFL passer. And he's going to need a lot of work in the offseason to get that going. And if Daniel Jones doesn't look good next offseason, he might end up like his first-round draft counterpart, Dwayne Haskins, swimming on the waiver wire. At 23, the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings just taking a tumble slowly and very far. Because the Vikings, they pushed up in the middle of the season, going for a playoff spot, and then they just fell short. Well, they fell back on the losing curve. I don't know if Kirk Cousins is the right quarterback for this team. This defense, of all things, needs a ton of work. Massive amounts of work if they want to be successful in the future. And it's just a very interesting situation to see because this Vikings team, it's not a younger team. They have a lot of veterans on this team that they just couldn't get to go into a winning season. And usually when that happens, there's a lot of veteran turnover. So we'll see how that bodes for the Vikings and whether Mike Zimmer still has a job this offseason. At 22, the Houston Texans. The Texans should probably be further back, honestly, because they're not great. They couldn't beat a talentless Bengals roster, and it's horrible to see for some of the talented guys on this Texans team. Like Deshaun Watson is a great quarterback. He just had all of his receivers taken away from him in the snap of a finger. Brandon Cooks is the only star receiver he has left, and granted, Brandon Cooks has played well. Brandon Cooks is one of those guys who has a high floor, low ceiling, or low floor, high ceiling. Not even. I'm saying this completely wrong. He's consistent, is just what I'm trying to say. He'll get you good games, and then he'll have some breakout games. He did the same thing for the Patriots. He was a go-to receiver for Brady with the Patriots. It is a little interesting to look back on that trade. The Patriots traded the 23rd overall pick to the Brandon Cooks to the Rams for the 23rd overall pick. With that pick, they got Isaiah Wynn, who he's been good, but he's always injured. So it always makes you wonder who really won that trade. The Rams ended up trading him not too much later to the Texans for a second-round pick. So I do wish that Brandon Cooks was still with the Patriots, but this Texans team is going to need a lot of work this offseason, and it's not going to be easy to do. This team has no draft picks left due to Bill O'Brien getting rid of all of them, which means they're going to have to convince free agents to come to them, and that's going to mean throwing more money, which they don't necessarily have, especially with Deshaun Watson off his rookie contract after this year. So looks like the Texans are going to suck for a while. At 21, the Dallas Cowboys. If the Cowboys bring back Dak Prescott this offseason, which they have to at this point, Dak has all the leverage, and this Cowboys team might actually start to look better next year. There's no question about the offensive side of the ball for this team. When Zeke just had an off year this year, but when he's on his game, we know he's a top 5 running back. Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback. This receiving core is one of the best in the league. You've got Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, all top receivers. The O-line is going to need some work as they've dealt with turnover at that spot. And then defensively, that's where they're going to need a lot of work this offseason, especially in the secondary. I think you got to, as many times as they've done it, you got to rebuild that secondary yet again. I think the only person you should keep from there is Trayvon Diggs, honestly. The rest of those guys can just go. You got to, if there's an issue, you have to get rid of the issue. So, but the Cowboys got a good win last week against the Eagles. It was a dominant win. There was no question as to who the better team in that game was. The Cowboys do have a real shot at taking the division here. So how Sunday's going to work for the NFC East title is, so Washington plays the Eagles, Dallas plays the Giants. So if Washington wins, they take the division. Straight out of hand. But then if Washington loses to the Eagles, then the winner of the Cowboys-Giants game will take the division. So granted, we won't know until after Sunday because Washington and the Eagles were put in the 8 o'clock spot, which is going to be it's either going to be a really fun game or a really boring game. So we'll see how that goes. But the Cowboys, as bad as they've been this year, they're turning into a better team at the right time. At 20, the LA Chargers, they moved down technically, even though they did get a win last week against the Broncos, a 3-point win. This was just due to teams moving up in front of them. The Chargers have been, like the Falcons, a very inconsistent team. They haven't had the ability to win the close games, and they actually did for once. So it is good to see. Justin Herbert is the future quarterback for this franchise, and it's good to see that right out of hand how the quarterbacks from taken in the first round of this class, like Joe Burrow, made an instant impact for the Bengals. Justin Herbert made an instant impact for the Chargers. Tua still has some development to go, and we've seen it in them pulling him out for Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then you look at the draft class before them. So Kyler Murray taken first overall pick. Kyler Murray's had his rough patches, but he's been a good franchise quarterback for the Cardinals. Daniel Jones was taken sixth overall. There's questions as to whether he's going to be their quarterback of the future. Dwayne Haskins was just put on waivers this week because he is a terrible, he just hasn't done what he needs to do as an NFL quarterback. He hasn't matured. He acts like a child, and that's going to cost him jobs, and that's why nobody picked him up on waivers or signed him afterward, despite the reports that teams were quote-unquote interested. And then if you go into the second round, Drew Lock was taken there, and Drew Lock is in question as to whether he's going to be the Broncos' franchise quarterback. So for the Chargers and the Bengals, it's good to see that they know that their quarterbacks are going to be good. At 19, my New England Patriots, who got absolutely destroyed by the Buffalo Bills. No question about it. The Bills decimated them, and I have no problem with it for two reasons. One, Stephon Diggs helped me come back from a 34-point deficit to win my fantasy league. So his 9 receptions, 145 yards, and 3 touchdowns gave me a 9-point win, and I won my fantasy league for the first time ever. So that was awesome. And 2, this Patriots team is god awful. And any questions about it, it's just laid out. It's an easy fix in the offseason, but there's no question that this team just wasn't good this year. I had a ton of optimism for them this year, especially early in the season when they took on Seattle, and where it seemed like if Cam Newton was playing, they would have beaten the Chiefs. That's what I thought earlier in the season. Now looking at it now, if Cam Newton did play in that Chiefs game, I think they still would have lost. Now, were there a ton of toss-up games for the Patriots this year? Yep. They could have beaten Seattle if not for one play. They could have beaten the Broncos if not for one play. So that's 2 games right there. That would have put them in the playoffs. Simple as that. But this team doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs because this team just looks atrocious. The only thing going good for them on the offensive side of the ball is their offensive line. Damian Harris and Sony Michel make a good 1-2 punch at the running back spot, which is a brighter spot to look on. Just sucks because we spent a first-round pick on Michel to be a running back by committee. Woo! The receiving core, absolutely atrocious. If they don't bring in a top receiver this offseason, there are going to be a lot of angry Pats fans. The tight end spot, they drafted 2 tight ends in the 3rd round this past year, trading up to get both of them. They both have not panned out so far, dealing with injuries and being inconsistent. The Patriots got the least production out of their tight ends this year than any other team in the NFL. And then the quarterback spot, Cam Newton. Love the guy as a person. He's a great locker room presence, great leader, great overall person. But he's a terrible quarterback. I've gone over the reasons why before. I'm not going to do it every single video. And then you'll flip to the defensive side of the ball. They just have so many younger players playing over there. And when this team starts to play better as a unit, I think that will start to help them out more. That linebacking core, I think, could be a very scary linebacker group if they grow into it. This year, they weren't very great because you had three rookies in there, and the leader of the linebacking group was only in his first or second year, or his second or third year. Ja'Whaun Bentley. And Bentley was put in a position to do something that he never had to do. Bentley was just a run-stopping inside linebacker. He was forced to do more this year, and he couldn't do it. So, yeah. But Uche, Jennings, and Terez Hall look to be Bright spots, if Hightower comes back, which I actually don't know if he comes back. All this stuff about how the COVID opt-outs affected the Patriots, it really didn't. The only one that really affected the Patriots was Hightower. Chung was on the downfall and probably would have lost his starting spot to Duggar anyway, because Duggar's been great this year, and Marcus Cannon would have lost his spot to Michael Owenu. Easy as that. So, do I think any of those guys come back and make an impact? Maybe Hightower, but other than that, no. All those 8 opt-outs, Brandon Bolden said he's coming back, which is nice to see. He's a good special teams guy, which means we can let Rex Burkhead go. But other than that, the COVID opt-outs did diddly squat. So this Patriots team, off year for them. It's going to be a good year for them to. It's one of the greatest off seasons for them to be able to rebuild this team. They have the 4th most cap space of any team in a year where the cap is going to be reduced, which means a lot of veterans are going to be cut, which means a lot of them are going to be picked up for cheap. So, great year for the Patriots to go on another run possibly, if they can get a future quarterback. At 18, the 49ers, as the 49ers beat the Cardinals in a surprising win for them. The 49ers, if they didn't deal with so many injuries this year, I think they probably would have competed with other teams to make the playoffs. I honestly think they would have bumped the Cardinals out, and possibly even the Rams, because the Cardinals and Rams have both been inconsistent this year. Whereas the 49ers, they've put up against teams where they were not expected to win. With their 4th and 5th string running backs, they ran for over 200 yards against the Patriots defense. Granted, the Patriots run defense sucks. But still, the fact that they did that with a 4th and 5th string running back. Craziness. This 49ers team, if they do decide to keep Jimmy Garoppolo, I do think they should. I don't think this is the offseason where you go and change that. There's not a ton of scouting out on quarterbacks right now. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's injury prone, yes. You also have Nick Mullins, who's done good as a fringe starter for you. He's not like a 16-game starter, but he can do what he can in limited games. So I don't think you change that up. I think you just stick with what you have. Go in, get your players healthy. This roster, when healthy, is just a craziness of talent. So if they go and bring in more this offseason, they're looking to be back in playoff contention next year. At 17, the Washington football team, I thought they were going to pull out with a win against the Panthers. They could not. Dwayne Haskins is a terrible quarterback, which is why they cut him. Simple as that. He wasn't a first-round talent. They drafted him because Dan Snyder wanted them to. Simple as that. The defense, on the other hand, though, is a bright spot of this team. It's going to be very interesting for them going into the last week of the season, as if Alex Smith is not ready to go, they will be starting their 4th quarterback of the year, Taylor Heinicke, as their starting quarterback to beat the Eagles. That does not bode well for them. So do I think it'll happen? Maybe. But this defense, if anything, will have to carry them. And I do think they have a chance to, with Chase Young leading them on that defensive front, who's just a beast on the defensive line and was easily worth that 2nd overall pick. At 16, the Las Vegas Raiders. They had their season finish as they lost to the Dolphins. Their season is now over, and in 3 years that John Gruden has been with this team, as much as this offseason has the most bright spots of any, it still doesn't look good for them. This defense in 3 years has not been able to become a good defense. The offense still deals with its own inconsistencies. And I don't think Derek Carr is the issue. I'll just put that plain on paper. Derek Carr is not the issue with this team and does not deserve to be moved. Derek Carr takes some of the most flack of any quarterback, but he doesn't deserve it. A lot of the issues of this team are not because of him. So, it's a shame to see. If the Raiders do get rid of him, I would love for him to come to the Patriots. Easy choice for me. If you were to put a list out of all the veteran quarterbacks that might be available this year, you're going to have Jimmy G, Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan possibly, Phillip Rivers, maybe even. Derek Carr. I would want Derek Carr. No questions asked. At 15, the LA Rams. Jared Goff got injured in this game, which led to a Seahawks victory. And the Rams are going to be going into their final game of the regular season against the Cardinals without their starting quarterback, as he will not be able to play, which means John Wolford will be the starting quarterback for the Rams. If the Rams lose and the Bears win, then the Rams are out of the playoffs. That would be the second year in a row that Sean McVay's Rams have just barely missed the cut for the playoffs. So, but if the Cardinals lose and the Bears win, then the Cardinals are out of the playoffs. If the Bears lose, then they're all safe, I think. If the Bears lose, I think the Cardinals actually have to win. So the Cardinals have to win and the Bears have to lose for the Cardinals to make the playoffs. The Rams just need to win. But I don't know if that's possible for them looking at their team. Jared Goff was his own issues with the team at quarterback. He was good, not great. And then you're bringing in someone different. I do think Sean McVay is one of those coaches who he could get a quarterback to succeed when thrown into the fire, but I don't know if Week 17 is the right time to do that. At 14, speaking of, the Arizona Cardinals are in a very interesting position this offseason, as they might not make the playoffs due to their inconsistencies as a team. They can go win on the Hail Murray against the Bills, but then they'll go and get beat by the Patriots, who I've said have sucked. So, what does that make the Cardinals as a team? Do I think they're one of those teams that can maybe make a Cinderella run? Quite possibly. Do I think it'll happen? No. If they make the playoffs, they'll be a 7 seed, which means they will be playing most likely the New Orleans Saints or the Seattle Seahawks. They're not beating either of those teams. With the way this team plays, this defense is not a great defense yet. They have a lot of work to do. And this offense, just as high-powered as they are, they're just not there yet. At 13, the Chicago Bears, one of the biggest surprises late in the season here. Mitch Trubisky turning the season around for the Bears, as the Bears go from being 5-1 to 5-7 to now 8-7. Crazy stuff for the Bears. Now, the Bears will have a 500 record this year, at the very least, possibly a winning record, which, if they win this week against the Packers, then they will be in the wild card spot with a 9-7 record. I don't think the Packers locked up the number 1 seed yet, which means they will be playing their starters. So, it is going to be a tough game for the Bears. The Bears have done very well offensively the last few weeks in a season where they were one of the worst offenses in the league, mixed with the Jaguars and the Patriots. But now they're looking on the upturn, and this defense is doing a better job because of it. The defense doesn't have to be on the field more often because the Bears are just going 3 and out. So the defense is playing better. So the Bears are going to be a late season push into the playoffs. They do have to beat the Packers to do it, and we'll see if they're able to pull through. At 12, the Indianapolis Colts. They had a 24-7 lead over the Pittsburgh Steelers and blew it. Phillip Rivers brought over his Chargers magic to the Colts, where the Chargers blew their leads. Phillip Rivers allowed it to happen for him with the Colts, as the Colts take a downturn, with the Colts possibly missing the playoffs. There is a 5-way tie right now of 10-5 teams in the AFC. 2 teams from the AFC South, 2 from the AFC North, and 1 from the AFC East. One of those teams, for the AFC South, one's going to win the division. So whichever one makes it through there, they're set. The other one's going to have to battle with the other 4 for a wild card spot. Right now, the team in the worst position right now is the Cleveland Browns, who we'll get into in a second. But the Colts, even if they do make the playoffs, I don't think they're a playoff contender. This team has been inconsistent and has just shown that they have the inability to hold steady leads, dominant leads, that if they were to do so, would guarantee them a win. So you can't do that in the playoffs. We've seen it time and time again. The Texans last year, they had a 24-point lead, I believe, in the first quarter against the Chiefs. Blew it. Chiefs score like 40-something points, win the game. So, yeah, you can't do that as a team going into the playoffs. And if they do, then don't expect them to make it past the wild card. At 11, their AFC South counterparts, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans, they took another loss this week. There's no other way to put it. They got absolutely destroyed by the Packers. Wasn't even close. They held Derrick Henry. And that's what all you have to do to beat this Titans team. That's what happens when you build your team around one player. You hold Derrick Henry, you destroy this team. And that's what the other AFC teams are looking at for this Titans team. They're going to be loading the box for the Titans in the playoffs. And because of that, the Titans they're not going to make it past the first round. If they do, it's because the team failed to stop Derrick Henry. Easy as that. Any team can beat the Titans if you hold Derrick Henry to less than 100 yards rushing. So, load the box. Don't get baited on the play action. And you win. It's as simple as that. And that's what happens when you build a simple offense, Titans. At 10, the Cleveland Browns. The Browns were without Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and KhaDarel Hodge due to COVID. And they've also been without Odell Beckham for the second half of the season, which means they were without their top 5 receivers from training camp going into this game. And the Jets took advantage, and they won. The Browns just couldn't get anything offensively going because they had no passing attack, because they were running with 3 practice squad wide receivers. So there was a whole bunch of dump passes to tight ends that just ended up not working. So the Browns lost to the Jets as the Jets got their second win in a row. And this put the Browns in a tough position where if they lose this week against the Steelers, then they're out of the playoffs. If they win, then they're in. So if they do win, then it'll be a very good win because they will be playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are not playing some of their top starters, including Ben Roethlisberger, Marquise Pouncey, TJ Watt, and Cameron Hayward, which means we're going to get a Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph revenge game. And I think Myles Garrett wants some blood. So I do think the Browns will make the playoffs, but if they miss, then it's just another hilarious season for the Browns where they just missed the playoffs. At 9, the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins had a good dominant win against the Raiders where they come back. Fitzmagic works his magic. He's having his face mask pulled to his left side, throws the ball up in the air, and it gets caught. The Dolphins go on and win the game. Good for the Dolphins. Fitzpatrick is not going to be able to come in for the fourth quarter of their game this week against the Bills, though, as he was put on the COVID list, meaning Tua Tagovailoa is going to have to play all 4 quarters of this game against a dominant Buffalo Bills. Do I think they're going to be able to do it? I have no clue. So, we'll see how it goes for the Dolphins. I honestly think the Dolphins might be the odd ones out for the wild card spot. If they lose, the Ravens are playing the Bengals. I think the Ravens are going to win that game. The Colts are playing the Jaguars. Colts should win that game. And the Titans are playing the Texans. And the Browns are playing the Steelers. So it's going to come down to Dolphins or Browns to miss the playoffs. And I honestly think the Dolphins, though they've had so much positivity this year, might be the odd ones out. At 8, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who got a lucky win against the Colts, who could not hold a lead. The Steelers come back and win on Roethlisberger's shoulders. He goes and carries them to a win. Steelers are in a spot to either have the 2nd or 3rd seed in the AFC playoffs this year, though I don't think the Steelers are necessarily a Super Bowl contender. They've shown that a lot of their wins, they weren't good wins, and I've been saying that all year. So, I don't think the Steelers are a Super Bowl team. I think it's going to come down to Bills-Chiefs for the Super Bowl from the AFC side. And the Steelers, this might be Roethlisberger's last year. So, they might want to start looking at the future quarterback position because Mason Rudolph is not the answer. At 7, the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens are just they're getting their step at the very right time. They're getting the wins when they need to go and close out the season. And with them doing that, they'll most likely be making the playoffs. So it was a good turnaround mid-season for the Ravens to go make sure they make the playoffs. At number 6, New Orleans Saints. All these teams from Ravens on did not change their spots this week. So we have the Saints here who got a win this week. And the Saints I do still have as my Super Bowl contender, as I do think they have the best roster in the NFC. And if this year's boom or bust for them, as they are like 70 mil over the cap next year, meaning they're going to have to get rid of a lot of players and restructure a lot of deals. So, going to be a tough offseason for the Saints. And if they don't make it, I think this is Drew Brees' last season. At 5, the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are in the prime position to go take another shot at the Super Bowl this year. The NFC is up for grabs, though I do not think the Seahawks will be able to take advantage due to their inconsistencies on both sides of the ball. At the start of the season, we were saying let Russell Wilson cook, as he was in the lead for Super Bowl or for MVP conversation. That fell off pretty quickly. And now the Seahawks are going to have, I believe, the 3 seed in the playoffs, most likely, after a win last week against the Rams, and there's not much added on to it. The Seahawks are the best team in the NFC West, and they've shown it, but I don't know if they're the best team in the NFC. At 4, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who got a destroying of the Lions. When this team is on its point, it is on its point, destroying the teams that it needs to, kicking their butts. But when it comes to playing a legitimate contender, the Buccaneers have not been able to do that. They have failed to be able to take down top NFC opponents other than the Packers. That I do feel like was kind of a fluke, as they lost to the Saints twice, they've lost to the Bears, and they had 2 other losses in there that I can't remember off the top of my head. But this Buccaneers team has to get their consistencies together if they want to go for a Super Bowl push here. At 3, the Bills Mafia is at its time. The Bills are in a prime position to go win a Super Bowl for the first time in their team history. Make a Super Bowl for the first time since their 4 Super Bowl losing streak in the 90s. They have won the division for the first time since the 90s, and they have another chance behind Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, to go push for another Super Bowl. I think this is the one team that can beat the Chiefs in the AFC. I don't think any other team has a chance, and the Bills got to make it through, push through, be dominant as they have been for the whole season, and go beat the Chiefs, because this team really could. At number 2, the Packers. Aaron Rodgers and his stash will carry this team as far as his shoulders will allow him to. Will it lead to a Super Bowl? Quite possibly. Though the Packers do have a history of choking in the playoffs. So that could also happen. But I think it is more likely that they do fall short. I'm looking at a conference championship loss to the Saints for the Packers, as the Packers are good up until they have to face a top-tier team, and I think that's when they start to fall flat, as this defense isn't as good as it was last year, and the offense isn't any different from what it was in previous years because they didn't add any talent to it. And that is the issue with this Packers offense. They don't change. They didn't change this offseason. So when teams are able to stop the offense, that's why. It's because they only had to study film from the previous year because they didn't change much. So although the Packers are dominant because of talent, when it comes to legitimate play, we're going to see if they could get outclassed or not. And at the number 1 spot with a 14-1 record, the Kansas City Chiefs, who have locked up the number 1 seed going into the playoffs, looking to be back-to-back Super Bowl champions for the first time in their history. The Chiefs are easily the best team in the league right now. There are teams that can beat them, but we'll have to see who will be able to do it, as a lot of teams I think are going to be looking at the Raiders' blueprint of how they beat them. This team, to beat the Chiefs, you need to keep the offense off the field, run the ball consistently, getting first downs, keep Mahomes off the field, and don't make mistakes on your own side offensively. No turnovers, no sacks, no loss, all plays need to be positive yardage to beat the Chiefs. And I do think some teams can do it, but we'll see how it goes. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed and are not subscribed, be sure to subscribe, leave a like. It would be greatly appreciated. Again, hope you all had a happy new year. Ignore my stuffy nose. Just have a little bit of the sniffles. But have a great rest of your weekend, and hope the new year treats you well. And into the new year, we are still rooting for those Patriots.